talk to me a little bit about what you've seen as in terms of the application of these technologies to improve the current way.
Yeah, and I'm definitely curious in your thoughts, Prakash, because I think you've even been closer to this space than I have. But we've seen a lot of pilots, right? Somebody once called it pilot purgatory, which I love that term of so many pilots, so much learning, data collected, reaction of consumers. I would say that a lot of them, from my perspective, haven't necessarily resonated with consumers. Because they were done from the carrier's perspective, if that makes any sense at all, right? So they were looking, let me get this data for pricing or for underwriting or get a better assessment of the risk or whatever. So, there was some potential benefit for the carrier, but really it wasn't a compelling case for the insured. So, on the margin, right? Could I help, shut off your water, prevent that loss? Maybe, right? But there just wasn't anything compelling. Can I give you a discount? Maybe I'll give you, 5% off, and mostly that's for the data, right? Or any losses I'm preventing or things like that. But I think it's actually been fascinating to me because carriers were some of the first ones actually touting a few years ago, right? Some of these IoT type devices, of which I'd never really heard of before. And I don't think of myself as having a particularly smart home, but we've been having internet Wi-Fi connection issues recently. My fifth grader just started school. It's all online. So I'm streaming videos all day. My wife works at home. She's streaming videos all day. My teenager that's 19 out of high school is gaming. And now my fifth grader is like on a Zoom call all day. And so, we were having bandwidth connectivity issues. And so I went to go kind of manage the connectivity. I've got 32 devices connected to our Wi-Fi here at home. And the Roomba, right? Like all the Amazon Echoes we've got in every room, all this. So I don't think of myself as having a particularly smart home yet. I've got this proliferation of devices and I can see them all because, I can go look at and see what's connected to the network. And so I think consumers, have really kind of raced ahead of insurance carriers that kind of, started early on in this space, but I haven't really seen anybody, really push through in a radical way yet. And so consumers have now, we're in the mass adoption curve of these technologies. They're not necessarily thinking of them for insurance use cases. They certainly don't necessarily want to take on a new device that somebody is offering them. And maybe they would, but they already have a lot of devices, right? So I think it's all about kind of working with what they have and then meeting their needs. And their needs are going to be not just preventing losses, but just managing their home, managing their day-to-day. And so, having some type of ethnographic study, like really understanding the consumer behavior and then figuring out, okay, what can we enable? And again, that's what I mean by, I think it needs to be totally rethought. Just get a white sheet of paper out and kind of design this from scratch. Don't kind of bolt on your outmolded insurance model onto this space. I think that's been the mistake that a lot of companies have tried. They've fundamentally rethought the space of what this new technology enables.
Yeah. I think you've given a really good perspective on sort of the what's been stopping the larger adoption of these technologies. And from my experience, there are a couple of things that sort of stand out, right? One is from a carrier perspective, you're right, like this whole POC purgatory, right? Because you do a lot of pilots, those pilots have a start date and an end date, and that's about it. And the biggest reason for that is nothing to do with, I think it's more to do with sort of the culture that's currently present, right, within the carrier itself, right? Which is, here's a set of processes and tools and sort of the way the wheel works, right? So there's cogs in the wheel and the wheel works. Wheel keeps going on and on. So if you're trying to now innovation and this like introduction of something new, doing something differently, and I feel that a lot of the pilots, are truly there to demonstrate a certain value, right? So a lot of the conversation like we have is about what is the value? Let's capture what this potential value is. And a lot of our conversations are not just about how the carrier is going to see the value. That's going to come, and there's a lot of ideas that everybody can have around, hey, this is going to give you this kind of data, is going to help you make this kind of an underwriting decision better, and loss prevention, loss ratio improvement. But the big piece has been in my mind, the whole consumer involvement, right? So one of the, when we started off with realize, especially in the case of IoT, you had lack of consumer adoption and ROI, right, for the carriers. Those were the two barriers that we saw as to why this technology hasn't been adopted. So we just started off with attacking both of these. Now, both of these are important, which is an opportunity as well as there's a downside to it, because you're now trying to do two things. One, with the consumers who've had a perception a certain way about insurance companies, and so now you have to change that, and they'd have to be okay with insurance companies saying that, listen, I want to actually build a product that is value of you, so help me understand what needs to be done for you to adopt this so that both of us benefit, right? That's a whole new ball game, and there's a lot of consumer psychology. So we actually spend a lot of our time researching, what do consumers want, right? What is that value exchange that consumers want and are okay with, and expect the insurance companies to provide? So that, I think, is one part of the missing link that's, at least in our area, we've seen, as lacking, and it's critical, right? It's absolutely critical to have that be baked in. And the second one, like I said, was the ROI, right? The economics had to work. If the carrier, there's enough people inside the carrier that can, shut ideas down. But the one thing that nobody can dispute are numbers and data, right? So literally, you had to have a ROI calculation which said that I'm going to do all these things. Here's the cost, and here's how the cost is way less than anything that I can save on a per policy basis, right? So we kind of looked at the details of what the ROI should be, and the advantage we had was we were starting from scratch, so we had no legacy products, right, that we had to bake in. And we said, let's just look at what does the market need and see if we can deliver to that, or provide that as the answer.